Welcome back. You're still watching the Diamond Breakfast. So we're speaking to financial sector deepening Zambia communications manager Eneyah Phiri, and we're discussing poverty reduction and cost of living in Zambia. Eneyah Phiri, welcome to the Diamond Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
2020 has been quite a year, and the COVID-19 pandemic has really increased Zambia's macroeconomic vulnerabilities. Yeah. People have lost jobs, businesses have gone down, some have failed to even revive. Despite so many stimulus packages. Is there a way of recovery as we get into 2021?
Yeah, you put it spot on. It's been a very strange year. It's been a very difficult year. And, the biggest challenges that we're seeing, especially organizations like ours who are looking out for the needs of the most vulnerable, is that it is the most vulnerable in the community who've been affected the most by the pandemic and by the weakened economy as a result. But to answer your question, yes, this is not the end of things, and this is why we exist, and this is why we're supporting government and various other policy leaders to put in place packages that are going to help, revive the economy. And the starting point is to look at small businesses. They've been hardest hit because of COVID-19. Prices of commodities have gone up, so families are unable to put food on their table. So we're looking specifically at how can we help businesses be resilient during this time, and how can we revive the prospects of businesses going forward into 2021. The idea then is to look at which businesses have been most affected, and that 80% of business in Zambia is informal, and this is really the heartbeat of the economy. This is really what drives families, what puts food on the table at night. And FSD Zambia, working in support of government initiatives, working with the Bank of Zambia, the Ministry of Finance, and other players in the space, are looking at specifically how we can help small businesses to revive by injecting working capital into the market and into the system, so they can be able then to put up a situation where they can have new resources to provide commodities to communities during this very difficult time. And we can talk a bit about that a little bit later as well.
All right. So speaking of families, because they're mostly in informal businesses, and according to your statistics, is that 25% of Zambian vulnerable households sold assets to meet basic needs, and this is obviously to get food and non-food prices, which have increased. So how is there a resolution for them not to sell their household assets? I mean, that's got to be painful to let go of.
It's really painful
from the home.
No, you're absolutely right, Katala. It's really painful. And what our research found is in order to understand what's going on, we have to go out and conduct this applied research and say, how is the economy being impacted by COVID-19? The already sort of weakened economy, how is the situation being made much worse? And how are families dealing with this? And we conducted a research alongside our partners, FinMark Trust from South Africa, across the country. And what we found was, as you've mentioned, Zambian families have been economically hit the hardest by the pandemic and the weakened economy. And what we're seeing is that financial health at household level has also been hardly hit. And it's very sad, because what we are seeing is that families are selling basic assets. So think of tailors and barber people, people who cut hair and things like that, are now resorting to sell the assets that they use to generate an income, just so they can find resources to put food on the table. And this is because commodity prices have gone up. The opportunities for businesses are dwindling. Employment is shrinking as a result of the weakened economy. So it's a really sad state of affairs. But like I said, what we're looking to do as an organization that's looking out for the welfare of small businesses, that's looking out for the welfare of families across the country, is how then can we inject resilience into small businesses by providing working capital, because that's the biggest issue. We conducted another research a couple of months ago that showed that 72% of businesses in the country are struggling with working capital. So they do not have resources to run their businesses. And what we're saying is, how then can we provide support to these businesses so we can re-inject working capital into their businesses and re-energize the economy starting from the ground up.
What's the long-term effect if, what you're talking about isn't practically implemented as a nation? Because obviously there's a lot of even maybe money lending going on. What's the long-term effect on the economy if we do not provide these packages? That's
a very crucial question, and it's a question we've been asking ourselves as well. And we've got a few answers that we found out. Firstly, to touch the issue of money lending. What we have come to find is, and in the survey, what we've come to find is many Zambian families, when it comes to borrowing money, they don't borrow from formal financial institutions. Already that shows that a huge number of Zambian families are excluded from the formal financial space. That is not a good indication. What we've also found is that the number of loans that are not being paid back by Zambian families is doubling. In May of 2020, we had about 8% of loans that were being taken not being paid back. By September, we had about twice that much. So what's that showing is that people do not have the capacity to pay back, and they're borrowing at very high interest rates. So the long-term impact of this is, should the situation prevail and should interventions not excel, is that businesses will crumble. Small businesses will crumble. The cost of living will continue to go up. Cost of basic commodities and access to essential services like health and education will continue to go up. And it's really a dark situation if we look at it from that perspective. However, we're very optimistic in saying we have, we're getting research and we're getting information and data that's required to put together interventions that are responsive to the very new needs of Zambians. 2-3 years ago, the needs were not as unique as they are now because of the pandemic has really shaken things up and just restructured the entire economic process. What we are looking to do now is to say, how then can we provide solutions to these very new problems that we're facing as a result of the pandemic?
I know that you have, as the financial sector division in Zambia, you received a 40 million SEK grant from SIDA, that's Swedish International Development Agency, to support the implementation of the Women and Youth in Financial Inclusion. That's the Phase 2 program from 2020 to 2025. Can this grant help reduce the high rate of poverty, and how can the targeted sector you've chosen be able to access this grant?
Thank you. It's a good question. And again, I must hasten to mention that a lot of the work that we do, all the work that we do, is really made possible by the support of our financing partners, including SIDA, including the UK Aid FCDO, including Comic Relief and Jersey Shore and Ruther. So the grant you speak of is about 40 million Swedish krona, which is around 3.2 million British pounds over 4 years, is focusing on reducing vulnerabilities for very vulnerable groups such as women, young people, and the differently abled in this country. Natala, you know that there is over 6 million young people in this country. Zambia is a very young nation, and many of these young people are involved in this, engaged in the same informal businesses that we've been talked about. So they are the hardest hit. If anything, the survey that you referenced earlier showed that women and the differently abled are very hardly hit in comparison to men. So we are looking at making responsible use of these resources, this grant that we've received by the generosity of the Swedish people, to focus on re-energizing young people's involvement into the formal financial space. So we will be focusing on women, we'll be focusing on youth, and we'll be focusing on the differently abled. We'll be looking at interventions. For example, we have a pilot intervention on financial education from the education curriculum from grade 1 to 12. And you might ask why this is important. If we begin to embed financial literacy and education in young Zambians, we are growing a nation of financially capable Zambians who know how to manage their resources, who know how to save and invest. So the idea is we're really looking towards the future and saying, how can we help the next generation of Zambians? And like you rightly said, given the prevailing situation and how it might go forward, how can we help the next generation of Zambians to be more financially capable? We're also looking at digital solutions, paying school fees via digital so we can reduce cost and burden on women who have to travel long distances so that they can be able to pay school fees and have access to essential services like education for their kids. So this is only part of what we're going to be doing, and investing in these resources back into young Zambians, women, children, and the differently abled, so we can look at resilience going forward, especially in these very hard economic times. But there is hope, Katala, and we're very optimistic that going forward, we can play our part to re-energize the economy, to revitalize small businesses, and to provide a prospective future for young people in the country.
Eneyah, thank you so much
for
coming to Diamond Breakfast. I have one question for you. Have you gotten your voters registration
card?
Yes,
I have. It's in the vehicle right now. I
can't
wait for August.
You leave it at home so it doesn't